I was always like mesmerized about the drummer and just wanted to be there and sit behind that drum. So drums was something that I always was thinking about even when I was a little kid.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the final episode of the Assyrian podcast for the year 2021. My name is Rhoda, and I'm so thrilled to bring you episode 161 with a guest who is very well known in the world of Persian pop music as well as Assyrian music. Robert Noghli was born in 1951 in Iran prior to the Islamic Revolution. His love for music started at a young age, and he eventually became a really well-known drummer and began playing with the giants of Persian pop music like Aziz, Googoosh, and Dariush. After moving to the United States, he worked with various Assyrian singers too, like Linda George, Walter Aziz, Shamiram Urshan, and Ogen Betsamo, to name a few. He recorded some of their most legendary albums in the 1980s in Chicago. AMB SAP produced an excellent documentary about Robert's life that we'll link in the show notes. What I found most fascinating about it is the way some of the most prominent figures in Assyrian and Persian music discuss the impact of Robert's craft, artistry, and leadership on the industry. He might be too humble to talk about his own impact on Assyrian and Persian music in that way, but he is a legend in his own right. He has played the drums on the recordings of almost 1,000 songs, and he has played numerous live shows with various singers. I really enjoyed talking to Robert and learning more about his life and perspective on music, and I think you will too. Before we get to this week's interview, I want to remind you to make sure you subscribe to the podcast, rate and review us wherever you listen to us. Also, if there are people you'd like for us to consider for the upcoming 2022 season, please check out the nominating form on our website. This episode is sponsored by the Oshana Partners, a husband and wife real estate team. Are you considering purchasing or selling a home in Arizona or California? John and Rita are available to help make your next real estate decision into a seamless transaction. Contact the Oshanas at 209-968-9519. Get to know them a bit more by checking out their website, theoshanapartners.com. And now, here's this week's guest, Robert Noghli. Hi, Robert. Welcome to the Assyrian podcast.
Hello, Rhoda. How are you?
I'm good. It's good to be with you today.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
I want to start off by asking you about your first music-related memory before you even started playing any instruments.
Oh, if you want to go that far back, I remember when I was a little kid, my mom used to tell me that I would go and to the kitchen and would take all the pots and pans out and find some, tiny sticks and start making noise on them, just banging on them, and she would get upset and kick me out of the kitchen and stuff like that. But then just growing up in my family, there was always music been played, whether my parents or my older brothers. I had 3 older brothers, and they would all play rock and roll, and my mom would play like German or Russian kind of music. My dad used to love Turkish music from Turkey. And so there was always these musical songs that were been played around the house. And me just growing up, just hearing all those different genres, from rock and roll to waltz to, all kinds of different music that was played. And that helped me a lot as far as getting familiar with different genres of music, until I was able to start putting my hands on an organ at home. We had a church organ at home that my mom had, and I started like fooling around on that, tried to learn the chords, and got myself a method book and started playing the keyboards. So I can understand. I knew I had to have something to do with music, but I wasn't sure, what instruments and what. So just fooling around with that keyboard or that organ helped me a lot.
Did your mom buy that organ in hopes that you or your brother would learn how to play?
No, she bought it for herself to learn how to play.
Did she know how to play it?
No, but she just loved it. She just loved to having it, and she would sit on it and just move her fingers up and down, just create some noise and notes, and she would be smiling. But it was there, and I had to, use it. It was an instrument, so that was a good start for me.
I'm also curious about the role of this global music in your home. How do you think growing up with all the different types of musics that your brothers and your parents listen to help make you, at the end, a more well-rounded artist?
Absolutely, exactly what you said. And as I mentioned before, it really helped me with growing up, getting more involved in different kind of music, from R&B to jazz and other things, and then and even playing music with the band, in the band with other friends of mine, musicians. Just being familiar with those chord progressions of different kind of genres, it really helped me with my music. And later on, when I started reading music and listening and analyzing, so all that stuff was really helpful to me growing up.
You said you taught yourself how to play the keyboard on your mom's organ. Do you remember the first song you learned how to play from start to finish?
I never learned any song to play, to be honest with you. What I learned was the chords, so I can accompany somebody else. I didn't I didn't know if I could be that good in order to, play melody with my right hand and chords with my left hand. It was just there, and I wanted just to understand the chord progressions and harmonies and stuff like that. So that's all I was concentrating on, just to play chords on the keyboard. And even when I started doing gigs, playing the keyboards, the organ, I was just playing accompany chords with some other people that were either singing, or we had a solo guitar player that he would do the solos and stuff. I was just the accompany player, just playing the chords. So never really played any melodies or anything.
That's so interesting to me, because I feel like when I think about learning how to play an instrument, like a few years ago, I decided I wanted to teach myself how to play the guitar. And so what I was focusing on was like, what song am I going to learn? And I recognized that that's because I didn't have a basis in like understanding how playing music works. So as a listener, what brings me joy is the whole song, right? Whereas to me, it sounds like you understood from a young age what it meant to be a part of an entire production. And you learned that like the part that you could play is like playing the chords. So that's super interesting to me. You said you joined a band at some point. This was a band with your Assyrian friends, right?
Well, at the beginning, when I was playing the keyboards, I'd started going to a couple of gigs. I was probably good enough just to be on small parties here and there, just to accompany some other guy, maybe two other guys, and just continued like that. But slowly, I was able to save money playing keyboards, saving money so I can buy my first drum set. And when I bought my drum set, afterwards, I started my first band with some of my friends from the high school when I was like 19 years old.
So you knew that at some point you wanted to get to playing the drums. What is it about playing drums that spoke to you in that way?
I'm not really sure, but in the 60s, late 60s, 69 or 70s, in Iran, when we used to go to movie theaters and stuff, there was always like newsreel at the beginning, mostly black and white. This is like, again, 69 or maybe 70, those years. And there was always like newsreels, short newsreels about coming from England or Europe, from English bands, British Invasion at the time, Beatles, Rolling Stones, and groups like that. And I would just look at him, and I was always like mesmerized about the drummer and just wanted to be there and sit behind that drum. So drums was something that I always was thinking about, even when I was a little kid. But when you don't have it in front of you and there's another instrument, I felt like I have to learn an instrument no matter what it is, so I can, start this journey, and then eventually I'll end up with my drums. So that's how it was.
I've heard you say in different interviews that you had a lot of teachers and no teachers at all. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit more about that, because I find that to be such a fascinating way of describing your learning experience with music.
In Iran, when I was growing up, there was really no music school per se for electronic instruments. In other words, there was nobody there that would play electric guitar and I would teach, or play the drums I would teach. So there were a couple of very famous drummers at the time. That one was working in a radio, in the radio orchestra, and the other one was working. He was playing in another band, which was like a radio symphony orchestra of Iran. And these guys were like basically classical players. In other words, they mostly would play the snare drum. There would be like pieces for snare or for timpani and stuff like that. So they were not really pop drummers per se. And so there was really no school that I could go and learn. So my school was radio. I had a little transistor radio that always had it on my ears, walking to school or walking back home, or even sometimes in the class, I used to turn it on and listen just to this American station back home, which was set up for American officers that were in Iran. So they had a American station that would play American music, rock and roll, 60s rock and roll, broadcasting from the U.S. And so I would listen to that and continuously, and a couple of times I even were thrown out of the class because of that, because of my radio was loud and the teacher can hear it, stuff like that. But then I had to start. I also watched another group on television when I was like, I think 17 or 18, and it was called The Wonders. In Farsi, they would call themselves Ojubaha. And when I saw these people on television, I was just mesmerized. And I looked at the drummer, I said, and he was an Armenian guy that I've seen him here and there. I was younger than him, of course. But I saw him and I said, if this guy can do it, I can do it. This is what I want to do for the rest of my life. And that was it. I had enough money to get myself a drum set. Of course, my dad wasn't very happy about it, but started learning on my own, started like playing on it and kind of asking this guy, asking that guy, watching other people that slowly were coming into scene. Other drummers in Iran, a couple of Armenian drummers, very good drummers. And I used to go to the club and just sit next to the stage, just watch their movements, their hands, the listening to their tuning of the drums, and just kind of trying to memorize everything and go home and maybe apply it to my drums or try to imitate what I've seen or what I heard. So slowly, a little bit like this, a little bit here, a little bit there, I learned about, basic fundamental of playing the drums. But when I was about 20 years old like that, I had a gentleman who I met. His name was Andronik. He was a very famous songwriter and arranger. And I met him in one of these gigs. And of course, I didn't know him. He came over and he told me that I was a decent player. And he asked me if I read music because he wanted to use me in his recording in the studio. And I said, no, unfortunately, I don't read music. And he gave me his address. He said, just come to my house next week. So that was it. For the next 3 months, I went to his house and he taught me how to read music. I did my did a session with him in studio, like a demo. And kind of, he was happy about it. And then from there, every time he had a session to record a song, he would call me. And then other people heard me and they started calling me. So slowly, I kind of took me away from the live playing into more and more into the studio recording sessions.
Is that how you got introduced to some of the bigger singers in Iran at the time?
Yes, I was introduced to bigger musicians. I was always lucky, and the reason was that I always ended up with working with musicians that were older than I am, and they were much better than I am. So I was constantly learning from them, and through them, I got to know, some major artists in Iran and doing their recordings, and slowly get to know them, and then start working with them on live concerts and stuff like that.
You were obviously born in Iran. You went to school there. You grew up during a time when live music in Iran, and pop music, and not just music in Farsi, but also like you've talked about rock and roll and like the influences of that. People of my generation, whether born here or in the or in Iran, may not associate that kind of music scene with the Iran we know now, which has like restrictive rules and whatnot. Can you talk a little bit about what Iran was like when you were growing up, and what your experience was with the music scene there?
At the time before the revolution, as far as music scene was concerned, there was it was tremendous amount of possibilities and opportunities for everyone, because what happened was in the late 60s, the traditional Iranian music kind of started to transform to pop music. So more and more people started listening to singers that would do pop music rather than traditional kind of music. And because of that, because the pop music started to getting a little more popular in Iran in the early 70s, so a lot of these major singers that wanted to do pop music, but there was not enough musicians available, because most of the musicians, like myself, we were working in the clubs. We never, we didn't even think about playing with singers or doing concerts with Zamara artists at Hamdian. We just, doing our own, having our own band, working in the clubs here and there, or weddings or parties and here and there. But then when this revolution started and pop music started becoming a little more popular, and major stars like Haider, like Googoosh, like Dariush, and those guys started doing songs and singing. So that, because of that genre, they started to hiring us, musicians from those bands, to come and play with them, because they needed musicians that were more into pop music, more into pop and R&B and familiar with those kind of music, that they can bring those influence into Persian music and influence those songs that were recorded in the 70s, 1970s area.
One of my fellow co-hosts loves Persian music from the 70s. He thinks that the attention to detail and the live instruments and the arrangements are something so special. I'm curious if there is something about Persian music from that era that speaks to you differently than the music we are hearing now.
Absolutely. One word is freedom. At the time, those days, all of our songwriters, arrangers, even artists themselves, Zamar, Shul, and they all wanted different things. In other words, when an album would come out from Googoosh, for example, she would have 8 or 10 different songs, different kind of beats. One would be a ballad, the other one would be a samba, the other one would be a bossa nova, the other one would be a dance song. So it was like a mixture of everything. And people like arrangers and songwriters were free to write and arrange any way they liked, because everything was new and everybody was open-minded. And so us, as far as us musicians, we also brought a whole bunch of stuff that we learned in other kind of music and mixed it in the Persian music at the time of the recordings. In other words, when we used to go to recordings, the arranger would come and bring us the structure chart of a song. We put it in front of everybody, guitar, piano, bass, and stuff. And then we would all play what we learned outside that studio environment, what we learned listening and playing R&Bs and jazz and stuff like that. We bring all those influence into those songs, into the studio, and to perform. That's why there was a huge freedom about what to do and how to play and what to play. And nobody would tell you, as long as it would make sense what you play with the song, nobody would stop you. Nobody would say, oh, no, this is not good. Of course, people had opinions. Producers had their own opinions. But most of the time, you were able to convince them that this is a good beat for this song. And they would go for it. So the freedom was the main thing. But after the revolution, what I noticed when Iranians mostly came to U.S., entertainers as well, after like first few years, things started kind of changing. A dance music started to become very popular, and so everybody was doing the dance music, and a little bit of copying. Let's say one artist would come up with a song, the song would become a hit, and then everybody would start writing similar songs to that because that song was hit. But that situation was not like that in Iran. It was everybody was on their own doing different things and fantastic things, I should, add. But that was not what happened in U.S.
I'm curious what it was like for you at the time to work with. I know they weren't born giants of the Iranian music, but at some point they became just legends. And what it was like for you to work with those artists. I know that you have a really strong relationship with Ebi. What was it like meeting him and working with him?
With Ebi was an exception because I've known him for 47 years and did a recording for him in Iran. It's called Shap, and that's how we started our friendship. And then I did lots of other recordings for him in Iran, but we never really worked together until we came to U.S. And around 1984 and 85, for 2 years we played in this club together. And then after that, when he came back from Sweden, we formed a band, and from there on, last 26, 7 years, I've been playing with him. But other singers, I met most of our artists, the Iranian artists, in the studio in that format because we would do their songs and they would come and listen to see if it was, to them, if it was, sometimes it was too fast or too slow. And so they would ask us to do it again, or if it was okay, then they would send us home. But I met most of these, as you said, giant artists later on in the studio environment. And from there on, they all liked my playing, or most of them liked my playing, and they wanted me to perform on the albums or the songs. So that's how I got to know them. And from there on, just our relationship, still friends with 99% of them and still in communication with them.
You mentioned earlier that your dad wasn't very happy when you decided that you wanted to make music your career. How did his reaction change when he saw you succeeding in that manner and working with so many amazing artists?
Yeah, my dad was not very happy. The reason was that he wanted me to stay in school and finish school, of course, continue to college and all that. And I wasn't. My whole thoughts, my heart, my everything, my concentration, my focus was all on music. I wasn't thinking about nothing else but music, especially school. I didn't like school as much. But he wasn't happy, and this what happened when I the transition from playing the keyboards at home and that organ to purchasing the drums, and now all of a sudden I'm playing drums at home, and of course I would cover it with malape, towels and stuff like that, so it can reduce the noise. But my dad was not happy. He would always say, neighbors are complaining and stuff like that. So at some point he kind of told me, you know what, if you stay home and continue your college and education, I will support you. But if this is what you want to do, you can't stay in my house. You got to go and be on your own, which I did. I was about 18 years old. I took off, went and lived by myself in a room somewhere, and started playing in this nightclub, got myself a job. And before I did that, I went and since I got my diploma, I was 18. I went and told myself, okay, let me go and do my 2 years of service. In Iran, every person, you either have to continue your education or you have to go do 2 years of voluntary service in army. So I said to myself, okay, let me go and do those 2 years, get it out of the way so I can continue my career. And when I went and applied for that, because I was wearing glasses, they gave me off. They said, we don't need you. Here's the paper. Go. You're on your own. You don't have to do the 2 years. And at that point, I was like 18 years old, didn't have to go to, service. So I started working in a nightclub, and little by little got to know other musicians, better musicians, stopped doing the weddings and stuff, got to do other things, other better things. And then after maybe it was the third year, maybe 1972 or so, I was playing in this big orchestra on television for this very big variety show that was on in Iran on Friday nights, I believe. and it had a big orchestra. You play live, and this was the first time that was happening, and I was part of that orchestra. And according to my mom, my dad sees that, and then he gets kind of excited, and he tells my mom, tell him to come home. I want to see him and stuff like that. So of course I used to go and see my mom, but I just didn't see my dad. And so my mom let me know, hey, your dad wants to see you. So after about 3 years that he was totally against me and not wanting me to play music and all that, I went home and he told me, I didn't realize that you wanted this so much, and you were not. I just was not sure if you were wasting your time. I didn't want that. I want you to be educated, but if that's what you want to do, then you have my blessing. And that was it. From there on, I had every support that I could have from my family.
Well, it sounds like he just wanted you to be successful at whatever you were doing. And once he saw evidence for that, he was behind you.
It seems like it, but it took about 3-4 years.
At some point, you and your family moved to the United States. Did you move before the revolution? Iranian revolution?
Yes, we did. Our decision was a family decision. My parents came to U.S., I think, in 1976 or so, and they really liked it. My mom had a relative living in the U.S., and so my dad gathered all of us. There were 5 brothers, and a couple of them had wives and stuff. So gathered all of us, and he said, what do you guys think about moving to U.S.? It's a Christian country, and you're Christians, and blah blah blah. So that was like a family decision, and we all decided to do this. Of course, took us about 8 months, all of us, group by group. We used to come, and this was all before the revolution in the 1978. And when we came to U.S. about 10 months later, all of a sudden we saw the revolution happening in Iran, which we couldn't believe our eyes, but we had no idea.
Wow. So it seemed like you left at a good time.
Yes. About a year later, all the artists that I was working with in Iran, one by one, they started coming to Los Angeles, to California.
Right, of course, because they were banned, right? After the revolution.
Right.
And did you and your family settle in Turlock when you first came here?
My parents settled in Turlock at the beginning. They came first. They came and settled down so we can all one by one come. And then I actually settled in Turlock as well. At the time, the way that immigration was, that you had to invest $40,000 in order to get yourself a green card. And so I did that. I opened a record shop in Turlock. It was called Potato Records.
Where was it located?
It was on Central Avenue, I think, near downtown.
Yeah, that's downtown Turlock.
Yes, it was in the shopping center that my dad used to own it. So I started the store there, and I was there about maybe 2 years. I got my green card and all that. And then I had a friend in Los Angeles who owned a nightclub. And so he sent me a message saying that if you're ready, come to LA. I have a job for you. And that's what happened. I moved from Turlock to LA, and I stayed for the last 30-some years.
Turlock is my old hometown. My family and I also settled in Turlock when we first got here. So when I heard that you had a record store in Turlock, I was really curious what street it was on. So you come to the U.S., you open that record shop, and then you move to LA and reconnect at some point after all the artists have left Iran after the revolution with them, and you start working with them again. But at some point you make the transition from being just a drummer in a band to being a band leader. Talk to me about how that transition occurred, because every band has a drummer, but not every drummer is the band leader, right?
That's true. Historically, piano players or keyboard players are band leaders. But I'm not sure why. I mean, a band leader's job is to lead the band, take care of the band, take care of the band's affairs. and that's what I do. The way that happened was I was working with Ebby in a club called Club 44. This was like 1986, 87, I believe. And we were working in the club, and then Ebby disappeared. He decided that he doesn't want to do nightclub jobs. He wanted to become a major star. So he disappeared. He left. He went to Sweden for a year and came back with a great album. This album became very, popular. And so he decided to form a band. He talked to me, and told me that he wanted to put a band together and do tours. He doesn't want to do clubs or parties and stuff like that. And so since that time, since I formed that first band for him in 1996, I've been with him since then and taking care of his band, responsibility of the band, traveling, the transportation, everything that has to do with the band, I'll take care of it. But we have a musical director who does the musical part of the band. And we also have a manager, band manager. We also have a roadie. So, but my responsibility is just for the band members and their needs. And
A&B Sat did this excellent documentary about your work, and they interviewed a lot of artists that you've had the opportunity to work with, or they've had the opportunity to work with you. And listening to them talk about you, one of the things that stood out to me was that they not only appreciate your talent as an excellent drummer, but all the ways in which you contribute to the team effort of producing a song or playing a song, and how you make sure that the other musicians and artists are good at what they're doing. I'm curious about how you developed that style of leadership and why that is important to you.
that is a good question of how. I'm not sure how. It's just, I guess, just doing it, just taking care of something. If you have a responsibility, you take care of it. Then, years go by, you become good at it. And I think that just started like that, and, put a band together, and then started taking care of the band's affair. And slowly, it became a responsibility, and it became a major responsibility, because in the Ebby's working environment, with his productions, everybody has to do the job to the top of the level of capability. So it was like that, and then became I just loved it, and from there on, wanted the responsibility and just having it. But I'm not sure how it came about. It just starting doing it, and then I liked doing it. I'm a very organized person, try to. So I like being organized. So probably the only way that I could keep everything organized was to handle it myself and not leave it to anybody else. Maybe that's how it started.
Well, it sounds like it maybe also just comes naturally to you.
Could be.
You said that when you first started, you didn't know how to read notes, and you taught yourself how to play by ear, essentially. Do you ever play with any band members who only know how to play music by ear? And how does that impact the experience of that person or the band as a whole?
Well, every musician almost can play with ears. I mean, every musician can play with what he understands and what he can hear. But reading the charts is only like a tool for you to be able to, what's the word I'm looking for? Like cooperating with the rest of the musicians, the rest of the instruments up there. So the charts is like something that connects everybody together. We all follow the same thing. That's the only reason that charts and notes exist, just so I have some kind of coherence. But a lot of times we have gone on stage and everybody knew a certain song, and we just played it without charts or anything. Everybody knew the song, and we just played it, just like you said. So reading music is really like a tool, additional tool to get better. Of course, last 10, 20, 25 years, I worked with, in Ebby's band, we always hired top-notch musicians that are always music. So our musical director always have charts for new songs and stuff like that. So we have to rehearse those charts are just a tool for a musician to have some kind of structure or some kind of roadmap to know where the song goes from the beginning to the end.
I'm also wondering about your experience in both playing live music versus playing music when you are recording a song. What is the biggest difference between playing the drums in a live setting versus a recording session?
Well, let me start by saying that I prefer studio work than live playing. Let me get that out of the way. I prefer studio work than playing live. But I have to play live because that's how you make a living. Studio doesn't pay as much. But the difference, one of the differences is that when you play in a studio environment, there's a song that you're trying to record, and you have to play it as many times as you have to in order to get it all right. Everybody has to play it several times in order to get the recording right. So one song, you maybe go to the studio and play it 2-3 times, and we get it and we record it, we're done. A song maybe takes a whole day to get it right. Difficult song, difficult arrangement stuff. But the live, it's you play it and right there, that song is finished, it's done. Whether you make a mistake or whatever happens on stage on that particular song, it's done. It's gone to the air and it's finished. But in the studio environment, you have a chance to go back and correct yourself, which in the live setting, you don't have that chance. So you better get it correct the first time.
Have you ever made mistakes during a live session?
Oh, tons.
How do you recover?
Everybody makes mistakes, and it's not because of not lack of knowledge or anything. It's just sometimes it's a mood that you're in. Sometimes the other musicians, maybe you don't click with them. Sometimes the artist is in front of you singing is not doing the right job. There are all kinds of things that could distract you, and for a second you could maybe miss a beat or a note or an accent and this and that. That happens.
Well, if I could propose a theory, as an artist and a creative person, it sounds to me like you might be a bit of a perfectionist, so you want to get things right. And so recording in the studio is more appealing to you because you can play until it sounds perfect than live music.
Yes, that could be it. You nailed it.
Are there things that you enjoy about playing live events?
I used to, but not anymore. One reason is that I'm kind of older, and the body is not the body of 20 years ago. Slower. I can't do some of the techniques that I used to be able to play. So it kind of affects your playing. And again, live requires lots of energy, lots of, but I am, again, trying to stay away as much as possible, or slowly stay away from the live playing and just stick to any recordings if there's anything.
Fair enough. When we spoke a few weeks ago, you said to me, I consider myself like I enjoy recording music, and all of that makes a whole lot of sense. In that AMV documentary that I was watching, something else that stood out to me is that there was an Iranian music historian, and one of the things he said about you is that one thing that contributed to your flair as a drummer for these big Iranian singers, something that you brought to the table that maybe others didn't, is your knowledge of Assyrian folkloric rhythms. So I'm curious how you think being familiar with Assyrian music helped to shape your style.
Something I always try to do, just to keep in mind that at the same time that I was playing Persian music with some Persian artists or recordings I hear there, I was also on and off involved with some Assyrian programs and shows in Assyrian club or Shotaputa with Suren, maybe. I can give an example. So I was back and forth, very little activities, but I had some activities with Assyrian artists. But in the meantime, I was getting analyzing a lot of Assyrian beats and stuff, trying to mix them or bring them into some of the recordings that I was doing for Persian artists and stuff. And a lot of that was very low key. I wouldn't tell them that, oh, this is this and that. I would just play that Assyrian beat that I know, for example, Sheikhani, in a particular song, and they would say, oh, this is nice. You know, what is this? I would say, oh, this is like an Assyrian folk beat. So we use it, and they would like it. For example, Ebi has a song called Shekar.
وقتی رسید آهو هنوز نفس داشت هنوزم برهاشو میلیسید
by Aghay Shamazadeh. And when we were recording it, I played the Sheikhani on it on my toms, and the producer told me that he liked it and let's keep this. He had some other things in mind, and so we played that in that way. And years later, I hear that some of the popularity of that song was because of the way that the beat was playing, and it was kind of new for people at the time, or 47 years ago. And so it was new, and so every time I had a chance in any kind of recording, you know, for Persian artists, I would bring an Assyrian beat if I could fit it in the song. As long as it made sense, as long as it was musical, I used it. Whether it was like Tuarama's kind of beat or anything that I could use. So primarily I tried to, you know, mix those in Persian recordings that I did. So sometimes you can hear it, you have to kind of be familiar.
I'm going to have to go back and listen to that song and see if I can pick up on the Sheikhani beat.
Sure.
You mentioned that you did some work with some Assyrian artists. It looks to me like a lot of it was maybe in the 80s. You played, you've worked with Sargon and Walter and Shamiran and Linda. I'm curious about some of those albums. I would like to start asking about your work with Shamiram. You played with her on her 82 album. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
How did you get commissioned to do that work?
At the time I was working in Chicago, I was managing SY Recordings. It was a recording studio in Chicago owned by Sargon Yonan. And I was managing the studio for him. I moved to Chicago for that. And so in that process of 2.5 years that I was there, we had some opportunities with some Assyrian singers who were living in Chicago or other places to do some albums. And Shamiram came about in that time. And there was a young guy by the name of William Neeson who wrote a bunch of beautiful songs for her, and we used a couple of them in that album. And she was a wonderful lady, fantastic singer. I don't know how else, how much more I can talk to you about Shamiram. She was an angel. She was fantastic. I got to know her and her family, and unfortunately couldn't do my best for her before her passing. I was planning on putting a concert for her with a big orchestra, symphony orchestra type thing, but we never had a chance. Lack of budgets and lack of interest and stuff like that.
She would have been a fantastic person to listen to.
I agree.
I also think that the other album you may have worked on at that time was Ogen's. I think it's called Diyarta Al-Watan. There is a song on that album I want to ask you about. It's called Sarakhata. I was listening to it yesterday, but I was hearing the words, but the thing that was coming to my head was my mom singing that same song to me, but the words were in Farsi. So I had to call her and say, Mom, what is that song you used to sing? And she said, I'm pretty sure it was this folk song. When I looked it up, I think it's called Bandad, and Vigen sang it a long time ago.
I am so sorry, but I just can't remember that song. I can't even remember Ogen's song. I'm not good with names.
That's
some
okay.
Of the Assyrian names.
The words are Asam Khordam Khodaya.
Oh, I see. Yes. Actually, Suran wrote that song.
Oh, You know anything more about that?
I know Surin wrote that song, and I think maybe Ogen translated it to Assyrian and sang it in Assyrian. But originally it was Surin's song that I wrote for Vegan. At the time, Surin was very active with major Persian stars, Vegan, Ramanbash, Arif, and used to play with them on their shows and write songs for them. He was very active in those days.
It's like the perfect song to turn into an Assyrian song because it's such a good like Sheikhani beat.
Yeah.
When I listened to the original and I like by Vegan and then I listened to Ogen's, it was like the perfect production for it to be a Sheikhani song.
Now, I could be wrong, but I think there's also a version available with Surin himself, played the violin. There was no vocals, no singers on it, just the violin and the band. Of course, I played on that track, but I remember that track with him, just him playing the violin. So there's 3 versions of that.
Oh, I'll have to look that up too. Speaking of Surin, can you tell us, did you worked with him, right?
Just few songs and maybe a couple of nights here and there, but known him for all this time.
What kind of role do you think he has played, or what kind of impact do you think he had on both Iranian music and just music in general?
When Surin came around, at the time it was pop music. Persian pop music was dominated by mostly Persians, obviously, and few Armenians. One like maybe a person like a Vegan. So people knew what Armenians are and this and that, but hardly anybody kind of would pay attention to Assyrians and musicians. And those words like did not go together until Surin came into the picture and started writing songs and playing violin, and the sweet way of playing that he was doing. And all of a sudden, there was a lot of attractions towards him, and people like Vegan and other major artists tried to introduce him. And he brought, so people started to get kind of curious. Who is this guy? Where does he come from? Assyrian, Ashuri. So slowly, people got familiar with that. Oh, there's this guy that is Ashuri. So he was the first Assyrian artist or musician that opened the road Aktani to Persian pop music, in those days. He opened the road, for people like me, musicians like me, that could continue and work in this vast market. But he was the first guy who, started the whole thing for us.
There's also another song from that same era. You worked with Walter Aziz on his 1982 Agapotros album. Is that right?
Right.
There is the song, like the title song, Agapotros, is like 9 minutes long, and it's just a marching band. Like it's some sound,
right?
Right. Yes. So it's like a very nationalistic song, and then what stands out to me when I listen to it is the beat of the drums in that song. What was that process like, and what is it like to like sustain that kind of energy and beat for 9 minutes straight?
Well, especially when you play a song for Umta, then you can't think about being tired or none of that. You got to be consistent. You got to be on top of it, because something about the recording is that once you go to the studio, do your work, and come out, and the album comes out, that's it. That album is going to stay around in the history. There's nothing you can do to go back and change anything. There's none of that. So whatever is there is there. And so,
did you guys for that particular song, did you lay the drums and bass first, and then the rest came along, or how did that process work out?
Normally, I remember Miapa Andranik Asaturian, who was an arranger and songwriter, Armenian gentleman. So I introduced him to Walter, and he decided to do Walter's album, arrange it. And then, so that album was arranged by Andrei Yasaturian. And when he came to the studio and we were trying to lay down the tracks, normally the way it is that rhythm section lays down the rhythm section, the tracks, like a drums, bass, piano, percussions, guitar, if there's any bass guitar. So everybody lays down those tracks first, and then they bring the other horn section or string sections or vocals or other overdubs that they need to do on top of that song. So we always did as a rhythm section. And in this case was myself, the bass player, and Mr. Andronik that did the rhythm section on all the songs.
Are there songs or experiences you can think of where you suggested a change at like the last minute in a recording and it actually worked out for the best?
Many times I suggested, like, we would go to the studio and play a song, or the producer would come and give us the charts, and we all look at it, and he would play the piano a little bit and give us an idea what the mood of the song is, for example. And then they would never write specifically for each instrument unless there was like an arpeggio on the guitar that has to keep a certain chord, and they would write that. But as far as the bass lines or drum patterns or even piano patterns, they wouldn't write those out, because obviously at the time, those producers and arrangers, their knowledge of our instruments was not as much as ours. I knew more about my drums than the person who wrote the arrangement for a particular song. So he could only tell me how he wants a song sounds like, or what kind of mood he's looking for. But then I was the one, or each instrument, we were the one who had to come up with different patterns and play it for them and see which one they like, which one works better. So it was always like a, give and take. But we mostly decided us musicians decided of what to play on each song. And sometimes they would suggest something. And for example, there was a song, there's a lot of them, but I just remember Gole Bita by Dariush. And they had a regular blues beat for it, the producer had in mind. And so he came to me and said, play it like that. So we played it, recorded it. He was happy, but I said to him, can I try something different? Just trust me for 5 minutes. And he said, okay. Of course, he was familiar with me and knew I wasn't going to waste his time. So I went back to the studio by myself, and they played the song again. And I played a totally different pattern and with brushes instead of sticks. And the song just totally came out different way.
لا 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 گل خوش رنگ بیتا.
And they were just, flabbergasted of the result. So stuff like that happens, and that doesn't happen all the time. But certain ways, certain times, you kind of get certain things get thrown at you, and say, oh, let me try this or let me try that. And fortunately, I was working with a lot of people that are open-minded, and they would trust me. And if I say, let me change the beat to this and that, they would let me do what I want. Some cases they didn't like it, but most cases it was working for the recording.
One of the things that I would love to talk to you about in terms of Assyrian music, and I'm asking you this because I think the breadth of your experience in the Iranian music scene and the work that you've done with Assyrian artists in the past, I'm curious what your take is on the current state of Assyrian music.
See, there's a process for a musician and an artist. There's a process. We start with weddings, parties, picnics, playing your friend's birthday party, just to gain experience of how to deal with audience, how to sing, how to, deal with your band, what kind of set list you should have. We gain all these experiences playing those, preliminary gigs or like weddings. Every musician that starts does weddings. Every singer that starts, they do weddings, they do parties, and this and that. And you go forward, and years go by, and you do albums as an artist. You do better albums. You do albums and albums. If you get to a point as an artist, as a singer, that somebody else, a producer, comes and say, Mr. Ogen, for example, I'm giving Ogen because he's my best friend. Mr. Ogen, come and sing in our, we have a concert set up for you, for example, with a 30-piece band orchestra, and we'd like you to come and sing a couple of songs. So when you get to that point, like Ogen, who's capable of coming and singing in front of a 30-piece orchestra and does a great job, does a beautiful job, then that should be the threshold. From there, next gig has to be better, bigger, more production, better sound. Everything has to be better from that level on. You have to continue going up, 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 up. So when you do that, when you sing in front of a symphony orchestra and perform so beautifully, again, I'm just giving Ogen as an example, but I don't mean him. So you can't go back and 3 weeks later go to sing in a Assyrian food festival. It just doesn't work together. It doesn't work like that. I mean, I still believe that those shows, those weddings, those parties should be for the musicians and zamare or artists that coming along, the younger ones. They should do those gigs. They should gain experience by doing those gigs. But our major artists that I can count in one hand, those guys should keep our level high. We should be able to have such artists that can do duets with other international artists, to that level. And we can, and we have, but their priorities are all mixed up, in my opinion. And they don't make sacrifices. They're always thinking about short-term, satisfaction, not in the long term. And because of that, our music, it does not go forward as much as we like to. And we always back to the same place. That's what I wanted to say about, our major artists and our youngers. Come in and let them gain experience. You already have those experiences. Do a better show. Don't just go with 2-3 musicians on stage. If you're a major artist, you have to respect yourself, and you have to them more, so people, other cultures can listen to us and respect us for our music and stuff like that. But if we don't respect ourselves, we can't expect other people to respect us.
How much of that do you think is because so many of these singers, even to this day, years later after they've started, their way of making a living is still the weddings and the parties? I
disagree. I have a very, very good example. I can give you this example, which I give other people too. In 1986, as I said, we were working in this club with Eddie, and then he decided he doesn't want to do that. He was just like another artist, a Syrian artist, ours, was doing parties and clubs and stuff. He decided he doesn't want to do that. He went to Sweden. They disappeared for a whole year. Came up with a great album, and then came back to US and stopped doing parties, and he just, formed a band and just did concerts. At the beginning, there were maybe 500 people. Maybe next concert became 800, maybe 1,000, maybe 2,000. And in a few years, we were able to play in the auditoriums with 10,000 capacity, and it was full house. So it takes a sacrifice. You have to sacrifice for your art. If you believe in yourself, you have to sacrifice. And don't look at short term. Don't look at, I'm going to do this gig and get this $5,000 until we see what happens. But it doesn't work like that. If you're up to the point of a level of a greatness, then you got to stay there and go up even higher than that, not go backwards.
Yeah, I was going to ask you as a follow-up, do you think that sometimes artists get discouraged because if they do sing at that they are performing with a band, they tend to be not as well attended? But it sounds like from the experiences that you've had, what you're suggesting is don't give up, that at some point people will develop I don't want to say this like looking down at like consumers of Assyrian music, but at some point they will develop a more sophisticated palette that allows them to sit back and enjoy the music and the lyrics without having to, dance specifically like in a concert setting. So it sounds like you're suggesting it takes some persistence and patience on the side of the artists.
But just think about it, Rula. Just think about it logically. Let's look at it logically. If let's say I'm an artist, I'm a singer, right? I'm not, and I have a show coming up in November, for example, or September next month, right? For example, I have a show, I have a concert in a 1,000-seat capacity. And here's like a typical conversation that some other people might have under the circumstances. The guy tells his friend, "Oh, by the way, so such and such has a concert. You should go see her, see a singer." And the friend says, "How much is the ticket? $100. Well, you know what? He's singing at my cousin's wedding in a couple of weeks. I'm just going to go see him over there." Of course, people will not come to see you in the concert and spend $100 and sit down and listen to you because they can see you at their cousin's wedding. You see? That's why it doesn't work like that. If you're going to be great artists, you have to stay and do great work. Don't go back. Go forward.
I appreciate that perspective because I think it comes from both your experience, but also for your desire to see Assyrian music move forward. Absolutely.
I'm very passionate about that. I'm dying to see our artists to go forward and be able to do major things with major artists, do great. As far as their albums, mostly I hear they're okay, they're good, they're okay. But still, the albums are not, they don't go one better than the last time. Sometimes they're just average. Albums, average recording, average songs. You have to, again, when you become a major artist, you have to become very, what's the word? Not to be satisfied and don't be so easygoing with your songs and lyrics that anybody just handed to you. Look into them. Make sure the songs are good songs, the lyrics are good, they make sense, the arrangements are good, musicians played well. Everything has to come together in order to have a good product. It's like this for everything. And besides,
be a little more picky.
One other thing that I want to bring up is that one thing that when I talk to my artists, Assyrians, and I tell them, spend money on your albums and do this and do that and stuff like that. And they said, some of them, not all of them, they say, you know what? Our national love for me music, and they don't pay a lot of attention to that. Listen, I am just sick and tired of hearing that from our artists. Our people know and understand music a lot more than you give them credit for. So do your job, do a good job. Don't just do a mediocre job just because you have this idea in your head that our Assyrian people don't appreciate good music and that. They do. Everybody understands the difference between Toyota and Mercedes. Everybody does. You give them a good project, you give them good product, you give them a good concert with good production numbers and this and that. People flock at your concerts. But if you're just going to go there with two keyboards behind you and sing the same things that you were singing at such and such wedding, you're not going to go forward. That's it.
Yeah, there is for sure a difference between listening to singers who know how to perform in front of an orchestra and for a large crowd than what you might hear at a picnic or a wedding, which obviously like I don't think what you're saying is that there's no place for that. I think you're saying that people who achieve a certain level of greatness should just continue to go forward and hold themselves to a higher level. Exactly
my point.
I have to tell you the first concert I ever went to as a teenager, because we had just been to the United States for a few years. I grew up in a house that loved Googoosh. And so the very first concert I went to was a Googoosh concert at Kodak Theater in LA. And nothing will ever be the same because it was one of the most fantastic experiences, Googoosh singing with her band. And it was awesome. So I hope that one day our Assyrian singers can get to a place where they're filling up those kinds of stadiums.
Me too. I wish that too.
Let's talk a little bit about, you said you are, you're kind of trying to step away from live music and doing recording and recognizing, where you are in life at this point. So I would love to talk a little bit about what the legacy you want to leave behind. Not that you're done, but what is it that you want to be remembered by?
Oh my goodness. Oh, well, I'm not sure. Maybe just the fact that by playing on so many of these songs and consequently people listening to these songs and give them a little bit of enjoyment, and that to me means a lot. And a lot of people, I get a lot of comments on whether on Instagram or other places, that people that appreciate my playing on such and such songs, and that to me, it's ultimate. I mean, I was able to do something to make some people happy, and that's an ultimate, being a musician, to make people happy.
If you could only play one song for the rest of your life, could you choose one?
No. No, I have maybe at least, I would say, 20, 30 favorite songs. I've done maybe between Persian and Assyrian recordings, I've probably done close to 1,000 songs, 900 and some change according to them. But maybe 30 of them are my favorite. I mean, I did a good job on all the rest, but there's some recordings that become so perfect and become becomes part of you, and so those songs are always like, they'll be my favorite ones. And some of them are like a couple from Ogen, there are a couple from Linda, there are some songs from Ashish. I guess I have all kinds of different favorite songs, even Persian songs as well. So about maybe 20, 30 of them are my favorite.
Yeah, it's like asking you who your favorite child is. You can't answer that question. I just thought I'd try.
Right.
There is one other thing I was going to ask you about, which is there is a video on YouTube of Ebi singing an Assyrian song at an event in Turlock. I think it's at Larsa Hall.
Yeah.
I'm curious how he learned that song.
Well, he loves Assyrians, believe it or not. He does love Assyrians. And so every time we have a show in San Jose or San Francisco, Turlock was the first time that we played. But we used to go to San Francisco and San Jose. And in the middle of the show, he would always yell, Chaya Turai, or stuff like that. Or Chaya Sirai, stuff like that. He would just yell at the audience. So he has that thing in him. And then one day we were just sitting around, this was many years ago, and he said, by the way, I want to learn one of these Assyrian songs. And I thought he was just joking. I said, okay, sure, whichever. And then the next time I saw him, he brought this song. He said, this is I believe, Arasi, Evan Arasi's song. And I want to learn it. I said, okay. He said, just write the lyrics in kind of Farsi so I can, memorize them like that. Again, I thought he was joking. I thought he's not going to go and put his time and learn this. So I did half of the page, half of the song. I wrote the lyrics, and I gave it to him. And he knew. He said, no, this is not full. You got to write the whole thing. I want to learn the whole thing. Okay, so I wrote the whole thing in Farsi, and I handed it to him, and we walked away. We went and did some other things. A few months later, we were at the rehearsal, and then he came to me and said, he came to our piano player and said, Ashish, play G minor. And he did. He played a G minor on his piano. And then he started singing this song in Assyrian. I was just, my jaw was like, like on the floor. How did you learn this? I said, I told you I'm going to learn it, but I want to play it with the band. So we prepared that song, and he sang it all the way. And when we went to Turlock, to that show, we decided to sing it. And according to people, he did the perfect job.
He really did, because it doesn't sound like someone who doesn't speak Assyrian is singing the song. Like, he actually got the accents pretty spot on. So I think
Yes,
that's why
he would.
people enjoyed
Yes,
it.
yes, he would ask me, "Hey, how do you pronounce this? How do you pronounce that?" And he would practice lacha, tama, whatever the words are. And yeah, he did try really hard to learn it the best way possible.
Your nephew is also a drummer, and he created a band called Dumara
He's a
Band.
great drummer.
In what ways do you think your career inspired him to play the drums?
I don't know if I influenced him, but more like maybe he saw me playing the drums around the house, and he would come around and watch me, and then slowly ask me about this and that. And at some point, when he became tall enough to be able to reach the pedals, I started teaching him some stuff, and he was very enthusiastic about it, and we practiced, and so that's how he learned. And in his garage, in his house, when he was like, I don't know, 13, 14 years old, we used to play together, teach him this and that. But he had a great talent, and became a great drummer, worked with a lot of big Persian artists, and even he produced a couple of major concerts. SEO was one of them. I'm sure you heard about it. And that's actually what I'm talking about. When you can perform, our artists, when you can perform in that level as a SEO concert, if you can perform in that level, then you can go back and sing in a Assyrian food festival. You have to leave that for other younger generation to come into.
I was at that Assyro concert, and one of the things I remember is
he put it together, by the way. My nephew put it together.
Yeah, I remember that. And your nephew is Pierre Noghli, just so I mentioned his name. One of the things I remember from that concert is one of the songs that Linda sang. She said, I think it's called Testan Testan, and I think it's on an album that you worked with her on. But she essentially said, people ask me to sing this song all the time at picnics or weddings, but I can't sing it without an orchestra, or like without a full orchestra. So I don't. And I know why, because that song just sounds so good. And taking away any piece of that orchestra doesn't make it complete. So it doesn't make sense to sing it anywhere but that, in front of that audience and in front of the orchestra itself.
Well, there was another reason for that. When Sago Yonan came to me and he said, let's do an album for Linda George at the time. This was 1984, and I was in Chicago, and we decided to do an album for her. And when we talked about how we're going to approach the production, he was telling me that he doesn't want any, spend as much as you need to make it a most beautiful Assyrian album as possible. Okay, so we had the budget. We hired a whole bunch of American musicians, a couple of Assyrian musicians as well, and Rassam Yonan, who is a fantastic arranger, classical player. He did all the string and horn arrangements. I did the rhythm section arrangements. I produced the album altogether. And the reason my approach was to this album was the way that I didn't want this to be a kind of album that people play it and start dancing with it. So even though a song was a Sheikhani song originally, I didn't play it Sheikhani. I played it different. I played it kind of R&B style, because I didn't want people to dance with it. I wanted more people to sit down and listen to these songs. So I played some beats that are not familiar with them purposely, so they can more listen to this album rather than just get up and dance with it.
Yeah, and that sounds like a great way to train listeners for that type of experience.
And what could be wrong with Linda going on stage with the 25-piece band behind her and playing these songs? It would be beautiful. I think so.
I have two more questions for you. One is, based on your experiences, What advice would you give to parents whose children are interested in pursuing music?
Please support them. If they have a talent, nurture that. Let that talent grow inside your kid. Support them, whether they want to become a painter or a musician, or, of course, at the same time, you have to get your education. You have to continue your education. So just in case, if you were wrong as far as your talent in music and you couldn't make it in music, at least you have something to fall back onto. So always keep on with your education and continue all the way to wherever you can end it. But parents, please support your children. And I tell you though, when I was growing up, we used to go to other Assyrian families' houses, relatives or whoever, this and that, and you hardly ever see any instrument in anybody's house. Nowadays, a lot of Assyrians, I know and I hear that they support their kids, and there are instruments in the house. There's a piano, there's either a violin or somebody's playing flute. So that is good. We came a long way as far as that is concerned. But even more than that, support your children. If they have a talent in something, support that.
And the final question we always ask all of our guests is, we have listeners all over the world, and if there's one thing you could say to all of them, what would it be?
Just get better at your instrument. Don't just, some of the musicians that I've seen, they learn a certain amount of knowledge, and then they stop and they think, this is it. I'm good at it now. I can go and do everything I want. But the music knowledge never ends. Even I am still learning about drums and about music still. So that never learns. Always try to, get your craft, make your craft better, work on your craft, try to do better, look around the world now with YouTube and all these availabilities that are out there. There's so much you can do, so much you can, go forward with your talent. And so that's it. Just work on your craft, and if you're an instrumentalist, work on your instrument. Be good at it. Be fantastic at it. Don't just be, be good at it.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode. We wish you a joyful season as you celebrate the holidays, and we hope 2022 is a year filled with health, joy, and bliss for you and your family. We'll be back in March of 2022 with more interviews from around the world. Stay safe, and we'll see you soon.